Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Torn. We have some new guests with us. Hopefully, we have one more. We're having some technical issues, but welcome back. I have a new background, as we can see. Power to the people. Um, and I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself, but also I have three other things I want you to do. The first thing is introduce yourself. Tell what you do in theater, tell where you're originally from, and then tell your nationality. Okay. So, Alex, we will start with you.
All right. Yep, let me make sure my thing. All right, make sure I was on. So yeah, my name is Alex Matsuo, and I'm an actress. I also do playwriting and directing. I am originally from San Diego, California, and nationality, I'm a mix of things. I'm part Japanese, part Greek, and part Irish.
Okay. Uh, okay, Orlando, your turn. Same questions.
My name is Orlando Parker Jr., and I sing and act in theater, originally from Detroit, Michigan, and I am an American.
Okay. Thank you. Now, let me tell you the reason why I asked those questions. There was only one of them that I really wanted an answer to. And that's what this show is about. I say this show is about programming. We've been programmed as people, especially in this country. Um, Sometimes what we think we see on the surface is not really what it is. It could be good and bad in cases with us. And the one that was most important to me, as was the nationality. Um, Orlando, you said kind of it, and I'll tell you the reason why. Um, Alex, you gave me your heritage, but like nationality, and this is Webster's definition. So sometimes Webster nationality though is the country that you were born in. Basically, it's the country or area that you were born in. But I had a nephew who shocked me and said, "Well, we really aren't Americans because America is a continent, not a country. We don't have a name for our country. We don't.
Mhm.
United Statesian doesn't exist. But it's not just us. Overseas, if you go to England and you say you're American, they automatically think United States. But
Mhm.
technically, if you say you're Mexican, you are an American. Not a Mexican American, you're just an American because America
Mhm.
is a country. If you're from Canada, you're an American because America is a country. But it's our programming. And so we're going to do some talking about that this evening. Um, let me let me start with you, Alex. I kind of want to get right into this, and then I kind of don't. Oh, because of your Japan because of your Japanese um, heritage. Your thoughts on what happened with Ovation?
I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts on Ovation, also with just overall the LA theater community. I think what happened with the Ovation Awards was, and the LA Stage Alliance specifically, I think I guess since I found out about it, I've been sitting like, how does that happen? How does an error like this happen? And plus, and then just completely shutting down after, once the mistake was made. Mistakes, well, it was multiple mistakes. Once the mistakes were made and they were made aware of it, I guess instead of trying to have the conversations and do better, they decided to shut down. Now, granted, one could argue that they were in such a deep, deep hole of mistakery, I guess we can say, that maybe there was no way of getting out, and it was okay, let's just shut it all down. Uh, and I think it also revealed this is not my personal experience, but working with, Asian Americans and having family who are full Japanese and in the community and whatnot. It's very much telling of how Asian Americans are treated in theater, and also just mainstream society too.
Okay. Okay. And I just realized I didn't. Not everyone knows what has happened. So, Ovation, which is in LA, there are what are they? What's my words I'm looking for? They because I know it's an award show, but Ovations is the award show. The company is, what is it again? Because
LA Stage Alliance.
Thank you. LA Stage Alliance out in California. They had their award show and they announced the nominees for certain, just like in the Oscars or whatever. They announced an Asian woman, but they showed a different Asian woman for that Asian woman. And
Ooh.
that was, yeah, that was a big uproar. And different theater companies started dropping out of the alliance, being members of the alliance. And as a result, instead of really trying to rectify the situation and make it better, they closed down. They just said, we quit, and they just stopped. So
Wow.
for the theaters that they were helping in the past, they're not there to help them anymore. So in my eyes, now it's like, oh, well, instead of saying I'm sorry, I just quit. I just won't do anything. And that's very cowardly, and it's not showing that you've learned the lesson.
Right.
And
It
showing
speaks
others that
volume.
yeah, it does. It speaks volume for them to just up and do that. Orlando, you are currently where?
I am currently in Panama City, Panama. Yeah, and so there's a very plain background behind me, but I'm looking out into the city out from a huge window. So it's interesting to be looking at all the buildings because it's dark now and everything's lit up, and I can see the ocean and I can see where the ships line up to enter the Panama Canal during the day. So it's really beautiful right now here at night.
Let me ask you, being down there, I don't know how long you've been there and what you've seen. As far as being out in the city itself, is that like anything in the United States? And what I mean by that, let's just be truthful and honest. You know how sometimes we get looked because of this.
Yeah.
Are you experiencing any of that down in Panama City?
Not whatsoever. It's so interesting to me because I'm here with a friend who just moved from Raleigh here, where I met my friend. I've known her for several years, and so that's who I'm visiting here. And I said to her earlier, I said, a lot of these people look like me. Like they're the same color as me. They have the same, hair texture as me and everything like that. And they keep walking up to me and speaking in Spanish because they think that I'm from here. And what I said is a lot of them look black. And she says down here, there is none of that. It's not black or white. And so that was interesting to me because when you were saying being brainwashed, we've been brainwashed in the United States to identify ourselves as either black or white. And it's just, we talk about race so much that it's always at the forefront of our thinking. So it's abnormal for me to go somewhere where I'm not seen as a color, I'm seen as an ethnicity, or I'm seen as a local or a non-local. And for people here, like if you were saying that man over there, you wouldn't say that black man over there, you would say that man over there in the red shirt, because that's just not how they refer to each other here as black or white. Everybody's just one thing. And so that's really interesting to be, experiencing this kind of culture. It's my first time here. And it's my first time visiting. So it's my 9th country and the first one where race isn't an issue, or it's not something that's it's not brought up, like what race you are. It's usually
Well,
where you're. The question I get is, where are you from when I'm here?
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting that you say that. If you can remember all of them, and you probably can because you're younger than me. What are the other countries that you've been to that Panama is the first one to?
Yeah, so I've been living in England, in London, for half of this pandemic up until earlier last month when I came back to the United States temporarily. And I've been to Italy and Spain and France and Mexico and Canada. And we lived in the Bahamas as children for some time, even though that's not considered a foreign country, and Barbados and places like that. So those are the places I've been, and Panama is the first place where I've not been. It's not been. What's the word I want to say? I guess being Black is just not a thing here.
Mm-hmm.
For lack of a better way of expressing it.
With all the places you've been and either lived, is the great number one quote unquote number one country of United States, is in your eyes, is it number one in anything?
Well, number one in anything, it has its qualities, and being in other places for extended periods of time allowed me to appreciate America. But the flaws that it has, I think, affect me in a much deeper way than its good qualities. And the flaws that it has, I notice a lot of other places don't have. And I think the race issue is just much more prominent in the United States than it is anywhere else, in my personal experience. And I'm a dark-skinned Black person, so it's very obvious that I'm Black. And I think if I was going to be discriminated against, or if any Black person is going to be discriminated against traveling the world, I would have experienced that. And for me, it's been in the United States that I've experienced it the most. And like you were saying earlier, the United States is the United States is or America is a continent, but even over in Europe, they distinguish it by North America, South America, sort of. So if you were to ask me in England where I'm from, I would say the United States of America, and people know that's North America, versus South America, which is like Mexico, or that could mean where I'm at right now, even though it's Central America proper. But yeah, it's been interesting kind of traveling around and seeing how I'm seen by different people around the world based on being an African American or a Black American.
Okay. Alex, let me ask you, with your heritage, have you been to other countries?
I have been, yes. I've been to Hungary, Romania, Greece, Great Britain, well, England specifically, France, basically all over Europe. I had an interesting year when I was 21.
Okay. Okay.
Sounds like a fun year.
I know, exactly. So have you been to Japan?
I have not. Some of my other relatives have, but that's on my bucket list.
Okay. With your Japanese heritage, and obviously it's well, in my mind, it's big because it's the first one that you mentioned out of the three. Do you celebrate a lot of the Japanese culture, or do you stick to the cultures of United States that are made up probably of Japanese culture? Go ahead.
Interestingly enough, I only recently, well, I'd say in the last 10 years, I've been trying to get more in touch with Japanese traditions and Japanese heritage. Because, well, my grandfather, who I get my Japanese ancestry from, he was Japanese American during World War II, and he and his family very much had to assimilate to American culture. And even after World War II, my grandfather was still aggressively discriminated against for his Japanese ancestry. So he was very much Americanized, as we say in our family. Even my uncle and my mother and my aunts grew up very Americanized. And really, it was just in the last 10 years that I really started to really get to know like my Japanese ancestry. And I actually ended up writing a play about it because we found some old stuff that belonged to my grandpa when we were moving out of the house, or getting ready to move out of the house. And it was a lot of stuff that we didn't know about him that we were like, oh my gosh, like this, he basically had this hidden life that we never knew about. So mostly in his honor, I'm trying to bring more Japanese traditions into my life, and really just get in touch with like who I am identity wise.
Okay. Okay. Something that Orlando you said, and something that, and I'm going to be programmed, Alex. So okay, my mind is going to be programmed for a few minutes. Don't hold that against me. Okay. I'm thinking like the masses. Orlando, you said down there they think you are of Spanish descent, like they are. Alex, to look at you, I would not know that there was Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, Orlando down there, you can pass. Alex, here you can pass. Do y'all know what passing is? Are you familiar with what I'm talking about when I say pass? Okay.
Yep.
So I am going to ask both of you, but Alex, I'm going to start with you. The passing thing, is it for you? Is it something that is a positive thing or a negative thing?
There's a lot of a big answer going to come from this. Growing up, it was often a negative because cops would be called on my mom and my grandpa if I was ever out with them, because people assumed, what's a Japanese man doing with a little red-haired girl? What's an Asian woman doing with a little red-haired girl? Or they would assume that she was like the nanny or the babysitter. And a couple times cops were called. My grandpa actually carried my mom's birth certificate and my birth certificate with him. So if he ever got stopped by the cops, he'd have his military ID, my mom's birth certificate, and my birth certificate to prove lineage. And back when I was like 5 or 6, I'm like, oh, why is Grandpa talking to the nice police officer? And I didn't really understand what it was at the time. So, early childhood, was, okay, cops are talking to my grandpa. What else is new? I didn't know really the reality of it until it happened to my mother. And I was about 8 years old. And I guess there are some Japanese customs or Asian stereotypes that I was raised with, being very, my grandfather went with the flow. I mean, he went with the flow, didn't try to cause a ruckus or a fuss. My mother was not that person. So when she got stopped, she did not take it quietly. And so, cops are called. One time she was in handcuffs. And my grandmother had to come to the grocery store or the mini mart or, wherever we were at the time, and had to explain to the police officers, this is her daughter. Just look at her face. Look at these two. They do look alike. And so, and of course, when you're about that age and you start to understand what's happening, it turns into be a negative. And I will say, I guess if there is a positive, I have been able to use my passing privilege to help family members, friends, which again, I don't know if that's like a positive, because of the fact that I had to witness it and essentially use my privilege to prevent, negative things from happening. But but then when there were people that could tell I was part Asian, it was mostly negative. It was mostly negative. It wasn't fun. So
Yeah.
I know that was a loaded answer to your question, but it's also a loaded question for me.
It
Yeah.
was, it was perfect. It was perfect answer. I appreciate that's honest. That's honest and real. And again, that's why I said uh, this is about programming, because what Orlando and I experience, we don't really hear the other side like what you're telling. You know, now yes, I'm. If we were in the car with a child that looked white, I'm sure the same thing would happen. But I just never thought about it with, with someone other than a black person, being in two black people being in the front seat and a white child, or someone that looks white being in the back. I never thought about it in, the case of Japanese people. Um, Orlando, so you're down there. You People are coming up to you because they think that that's who you are, or you're one of them. Um, what are your thoughts on? Is that somewhere where you could stay permanently? And do you think you would rather be there than be in the United States? Let me
Oh,
ask.
wow. Would I rather be here than the United States? I don't really know, so I can't say that at this point. I know I would rather be in London, where I moved to last year, rather than the United States, and where I
Okay.
plan on going back to when
Uh-huh.
it's safe. They're still in their national lockdown right now, which is why I'm not there presently. Um, what I will
But
say about your initial question is it's
uh-huh.
complex for me too, because it's great to have them think that and to be able to go certain places here that statistically or historically isn't safe for foreigners to travel to be able to go those places and get through and pass it. That's, I guess, one of the pros. But I guess the negative, if you will, if you could call it a negative for me personally, is that I have a pride for where I come from. I can't necessarily say I have a pride in being an American, but I have a pride for where I come from. And, I didn't have a say in it. I am from America. That's where I was born. And the pride lies in that, we were brought from where my family originally comes from in Africa, and we know our heritage. We were brought there by force to provide free labor for people who had stolen that land. It was inhabited land, and they stole it, and they, I guess, were too lazy to build it up themselves. And so they're so lazy that they would rather go all the way across the ocean and steal human beings and bring them back like sardines on ships to build the country for them, which is what my family, my heritage is that. And if I were, if this was 160 years ago, I would be a slave in that country. But the fact that today I'm sitting here in Panama, and a month ago I was in England, and all of that, coming from where I came from, I have pride in that. I'm proud to say that, I came from this place where we had nothing, and we were at such a disadvantage, and now, we're billionaires, and we travel the world, and we're doctors and lawyers and presidents of that same country. So there's a pride in that. So I really don't like being mistaken for anything else. I want you to know that I started as a slave, and now I'm here, and I'll be there, and then I'll be there, and I'll be there. I'm very, very proud of that. And so my identity is somewhat tied up in being born in the United States of America. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Let me ask you something you said. Why do you prefer London, England, over the United States?
That's another very personal reason. It's because I'm an artist. I've been performing since I was a kid, professionally, and where I'm from in Detroit, you were not considered a professional as a singer or an actor until you had been paid. That's just the time and the standard. And so I first began getting paid at 19 years old to be on stage. And so I'm not going to tell you how old I am now, but it's been a while. And so there are just more opportunities for me in Europe as someone who is trying to make a living, pay bills, and do and provide myself my very basic needs with what I do. There's more opportunity for me in Europe. There's much more an appreciation, and my race isn't such an issue when it comes to getting gigs and things like that. And there's more of my primary discipline is I'm a vocalist. I sing my own music. I do covers and things like that. And so performing in clubs, bars, and music venues, that's my primary discipline. And so I can get more work over there. There's a greater appreciation for being a soul singer who has who I grew up singing in church, and it's apparent in the way that I sing that gospel, that Black gospel. There's just more of an appreciation for it there. I think, you know, in America, that sound it's like a niche almost, that Sam Cooke, you know, kind of a sound. And so over there, they just appreciate it more. They love that that sound, that culture, you know, so many of the things that I feel like I have to offer as a Black person, they seem to just appreciate it over there for whatever reason. And I find that in the United States of America, it seems to be more intimidating, my Blackness, my churchness, and all those things that make me who I am. And so I go where I'm appreciated and where I'm welcomed. And right now I'm being more appreciated over there. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Alex, let me ask you a question. Let me present two words to you and both of you, and I want your opinions on them. Cancel culture. Your opinion first, and then I'll give mine after you guys. Your opinion on those words and what you think about them and what they mean, and just whatever you feeling about those two words. When you hear those words, what's the first thing that comes to you?
I think of consequence culture. That's what I like to call it.
Okay.
The first thing that pops in my mind when I hear cancel culture is unforgiveness. I posted something on my personal social media recently about this because I personally don't agree with it. I don't believe in canceling anyone. I believe that I have to give people the opportunity to make mistakes. There will be consequences to your mistakes, and we're going to let you know. However, we do have to give you an opportunity to make it right. And if you are willing to take the necessary steps to rectify whatever it was that you did, then I need to be willing to forgive you. I'm never going to get to where I want to be as far as race relations goes, and different shades of people from different places in the world living side by side in a harmonious way, which is my goal for when I join discussions like this. It's not to, you know, only highlight what's wrong. I'm a solutions-driven person, so I want to openly talk about the issues without hesitation, but then also try to find a solution to it, because I don't want to be in the same place tomorrow that I am today. And so with that being said, I have to allow you some room to make mistakes. And when you make them, I'm going to call you out, but I'm not going to try to cancel you and just destroy you and ruin you for good, because I don't think that's productive at all. So I don't agree with cancel culture.
Okay. And I try normally not to give my opinion, but I want to give my opinion on it. When I hear cancel culture, you know what I think about? I think about the natives who were here originally, and the settlers came over here and canceled their culture. I think about Alex. Now I think about your heritage and how they were put in concentration camps in California and more or less trained and brainwashed to forget their culture. And Orlando, our culture is just it goes without saying. It goes without saying. So it's not funny, but it's kind of funny when I hear someone saying the cancel culture, because I'm like, do you realize how many cultures y'all have canceled? And now you're upset because you got called out for something you you did. You actually physically did, whereas in you canceled ours and we didn't do anything. So there there have been some debates on about that and on that. I am going to move on to theater because I know Orlando, you only have an hour with us, right? Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna move on to theater because Orlando, you kind of started it, so I was like, well, we might as well go on there. Now, Alex, let me ask you because you're in my area. Have you been in the room because of the passing? And because someone mentioned this in one of the other shows, and they talked a certain way until they found out your background. Can you tell us something about that?
That, and it's gonna sound like I'm kind of dogging on the North Carolina theater community, but I really didn't experience this until I moved to Raleigh. Given that I'm from San Diego, we have a lot more diversity in California, I guess, in theater.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there have been conversations that have happened, like even just like what's seemingly harmless ones of like Asians being good at math, or even, and there was one where basically it was just fetish. I can't even say it. Fetishization of, I can't talk tonight, of Asian women, and I'm like, hi.
Mm-hmm.
It's my dating life, basically, a little bit for a while. Yeah, it's happened. It's happened. Not as often lately, which is good, and not just because of COVID and we're not working. But
No.
yeah, when I moved to North Carolina, I experienced it a lot more, and it was a new experience for me. And the first time it happened, at the time my mom was still alive, and I called her and I'm like, so this happened, and I'm like, how? And I asked her, I'm like, how do you do it? Because I was about ready to storm out and get on Twitter and just blast it all to the world. And I'm glad I called my mom first, because she talked me down from the ledge. But and she told me, she's like, Alex, you're in a different position, because people will feel safe because of your because you look white. People will feel safe divulging that with you, because in their minds they are going to assume that you are going to agree with them because because you look white. That's how she said it. She never used the term white passing or anything. And I'm like, that's weird. Like, why would people just talk about that? I didn't really like get it, like, because I think you're the same race, ethnicity as me. I feel safer exposing my implicit bias or my bias or racism about this group to you. Yeah, it was
Okay.
an interesting experience.
Thank you, Orlando. Obviously, when you walk in the room, if they've been talking about that, they stop. Because
They better. They better,
right?
because Lord knows.
It's gonna be on and popping. But have you
Yeah, I'm
ever?
going to call every newspaper I know, and we're going to have articles all about it, which we have done in the past. Yeah, I don't play around. And they
You
know
and
it
I
in
don't
Raleigh very much so.
Yeah, you and I don't need to be in the same room at the same time, because
No, we don't.
we would tear it up. But
Yeah.
have you been into any theater spaces where when you walked in the room it was an uneasy feeling, like the atmosphere, you felt like the atmosphere changed and everybody kind of turned and looked at you and didn't say anything for a while, and then they try to, oh hey, tell us a little bit about that.
The same. Yeah, I have to say I do know absolutely what you just described to the T, because in Detroit on that in that scene I never experienced that, because it was much more diversity, in Detroit theater as well. It wasn't until I moved to Raleigh and got into the theater scene here that I began to, or there rather, began to experience, that. And I refer to it as microaggressions, which I
Yeah.
despise, and I call them out, and I deal with them head on. The biggest thing for me is that, I in that space I am a performer, and at the end of the day, the art and the performance speaks for itself. And I know it doesn't matter what you think of me, or if you think I'm inferior to you based on outward things. Once we get on stage, everyone will see what the truth is. And I will outperform you and put you in your place that way. And that's usually what I do. It's like, I think that there is an intimidation for some strange reason, because people feel like if certain minorities have been, that historically better at certain things than other people in sports and music and things like that. And when you walk in the room and it's a musical audition and there's this black singer, it's like, oh God, here we go. We know he's going to get the part. And I think it's an intimidation thing from that standpoint, is what I've personally experienced. Because a lot of times when I hear people who I feel like are being a little shady or weird towards me, get up and sing and do what it is they do, I'm like, well, I see why you have that disposition. You're very insecure about what you have to offer. And so unfortunately, you're expressing it and it's manifesting in a very, negative and unhealthy way. And so, I've just dealt with it by being the absolute best at what I can be, at what I do, and being as professional as possible, and letting people who are not professional, be a contrast to how I'm carrying myself. And they usually highlight their flaws, all on their own. When you maintain your professionalism, your composure, and you just go out there and you just do your absolute best and give it your all, while they're sort of focusing on those other things and, displaying microaggressions and all that foolishness. So yeah, I find that, just doing your best and outshining those negative people is the best way to handle the situation. And that's usually what I do.
Well, let me ask you a question. Something you said. You go out there and you obviously you're good. You're good at what you do, but you try to make sure. Do you feel like you have to go out there and be extra because of your skin?
Absolutely. I was raised that way from the very beginning. My parents taught me you have to be twice as good to get half as far, unfortunately. And I believe that was true when my parents were growing up. I don't believe that you have to be twice as good to get half as far at this point in time, but I still believe you have to be twice as good to get just as far. I mean, I know it to be true because there are a lot of, non-Black talent who I personally feel are very mediocre, who tend to, excel or be exalted over other people who are minorities and are clearly, superior, vocally or acting or whatever it is. And it's not just by other minorities who think that, it's by everyone. They think it and see it. And yet certain people, seem to be praised and worshiped above those. And it's just like, what is it? What is it based on? Because it's obviously not based on talent. And this, I mean, this is theater. It's a talent game. So if it's not based on talent, what is it based on? Like, are you related to somebody? Are you the director's cousin? Are you the reviewer's cousin? Like, what is it based on? You know what I mean?
Okay. So, and obviously, everything I'm asking you, Orlando. I already know, but I'm doing this for
Well, it's
people who
based
want.
on race, basically. I mean, I didn't say that, but that's what I'm saying. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
the
Of
difference
course.
is based on race usually. Yeah, it's why
Hmm.
that person gets the gig or the good review over you, even if their talent is just not there.
Hmm. Okay. Oh, that's your cat, Alex.
Yeah, she's hanging out with me during this
Okay.
interview.
I didn't know what that was. I feel all like,
I
Lord,
love
I thought,
it.
I was like, what? Look, I had Orlando. I thought that was you. I was like, what in the world?
No, I'm not that catty.
So, Alex, do you
Yes.
think by letting people know your heritage that has hindered you in theater in any way?
Um, no, I don't think so. Because at the end of the day, well, my experience in theater has been drastically different. I'd say here in North Carolina, it kind of has um, a little bit, and I guess one could argue it worked to my advantage for a production of Avenue Q I was in, and I played Christmas Eve, which I struggled. I struggled with that. I struggled with that, but I was also it was lots of discussions happened between me, the director, the artistic director, and they said they wanted someone of Japanese heritage to be in the role, instead of having someone else be in the role. And I had a lot of discussions with my theater crew back in California, and I said, if this was me looking from the outside, I'd be kind of side-eyeing, but also at the same time I was like, well, it's my grandfather. It's not like it's my 10th great 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 grandfather that they're using to justify. It's you are part Asian, and this you should play this role. And I actually never didn't even audition for the show. They called me, which told me they didn't get the talent pool that they wanted to do the show. And I love this theater dearly. I wish that there were some more discussions with the public about it, because for me, I encountered some pushback. Uh, getting accused of a lot of things that was not when people don't know who I am or what my heritage is, it gets dicey, and I wish there was some more um, conversations about it, because some of the reviews did make some really problematic statements, not just about me, but about what is Japanese. And it's interesting because I've never encountered really that kind of microaggression bias until, like I said, until I moved to North Carolina. I also played Asian roles in San Diego too, and I was actually part of an Asian American repertory theater in San Diego, writing plays and performing, and you know doing a lot of exploration of who I am heritage wise, and working with other Asian Americans, and even working in LA with the LA Stage Alliance. Wasn't quite as problematic back then. At least I didn't think it was. With the recent events now, I wonder. But yeah, like I said, it didn't really become a problem until I moved here. Um, Southern California theater culture is extremely different, extremely different. And there's a lot more diversity. There's a lot more diversity out there, and the fact that I had acceptance of being a part Asian woman in California, in the Asian American community, I had acceptance there, and I don't have that acceptance here, if that makes
Oh,
sense.
yes, it does. But
Totally.
it's something you said. So those reviews were written by the majority were written by who?
Do you want me to name names?
No, you don't have to
Yes,
name.
I do. No, just kidding.
Oh, I'll message you, Orlando.
Just be
Uh,
fun.
White people.
okay.
Yeah.
So let me get this right. So white people were trying to tell you what it takes to be Japanese.
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, so Orlando, that leads us. We're gonna go right over to him on this one. Um, and I'm coming back to you on something else you said. Have you ever experienced Orlando in a play where a director who is not of your culture tries to tell you what your how you're supposed to act in your culture?
I have, unfortunately, and it was in Raleigh as well for me. Not to bash Raleigh, but
No, tell the
I'm
truth.
also
Tell
at
the
this
truth. That's
place.
what we're here for.
Yeah, we got to tell you. I'm also at this place in Raleigh and in North Carolina in general where I'm just speaking bluntly about how racist of a state it actually is. I don't think I realized it when I moved there from Detroit in 2008, or else I probably wouldn't have moved there. But it's revealed itself to me more and more, and most recently through the previous presidential administration. I noticed a drastic shift in change and certain people's willingness to openly and outwardly express their racism and feelings of superiority. So my current feelings on Raleigh in North Carolina in general is that it's a very racist state, unlike any. And I've lived in California growing up. We lived in Florida. I'm from Michigan. I've lived in Atlanta twice, Baltimore, many different places, but it's unlike any of those in my personal experience. And so go back to your question. Yeah, I have experienced that in theater, specifically with this one musical director who kept trying to tell me how to sing and to come off a certain way because I was playing multiple characters in this production. And the script, it was called The Toxic Avenger, and I had to play 15 characters, but my primary character's name was Black Dude. It was Black Dude and White Dude, and each of us had to play multiple characters. And so some of the characters I felt like called for me to be more of a stereotypical Black man, and and she was really trying to coach me on how I needed to sing those certain parts. And I was just like, well, where is your experience in this actually coming from? Because I am Black and I live this every single day. And you are coming from a place of, stereotypes that you've seen. You haven't lived or experienced any of this. And so I found that quite interesting, that someone who was not of African descent was trying to tell me how to be an African performer or sing that way. And so, yeah, I've experienced it, and I call people out on it as I did in that situation. But yeah, it's just because, it's a very racist place and people there have not experienced diversity at the level of a lot of other theaters in places like New York and LA. And so it's been difficult to get them to adjust to, Raleigh's is still an up and coming city and people are flooding in, especially over the past 10 years. And I just think there's some resistance and familiarity with different, with working side by side with different races and cultures. So, yeah.
I'm gonna stick with you right now because once you get off, Alex, it'll be you and me. So we can unless if you can stay on, we can talk. So Orlando, I'm gonna do phrases and I just want your honest first, which I already know I'm getting honest because you ain't been nothing but honest the last 15 minutes. I would do more Black plays and cast Black people, but there really aren't any Black people in theater. And go.
That's absolutely not true. Not true, not true, not true. There are so many Black actors. I mean, I got to the point where I wasn't going to auditions, but when I was going to them, I mean, there were so many Black singers and actors because I primarily would do musical theater. So you'll hear me talk about singers a lot. There were so many singers, and there were so many Black actors who really couldn't sing, but still would come out to try to get the part because they were getting cast a lot. And so they were like, if this is a part where I can get cast, I'm gonna just fake it until I make it kind of a thing. They just wanted to be on stage and to be able to create and get better and to be a part of something. So they would go to whatever auditions were there, and I would see them there, and there's so many. And then for me, I perform at all the clubs and bars in Raleigh too, outside of theater. So I'm seeing it from both sides. There's so many African-American performing artists in general who are hungry and yearning for an opportunity and to be on stage, and they're just not being given the opportunities for whatever reason. So that's what the problem is. It's not that there is a lack of brown and Black performers, because they're plentiful. Trust me.
Okay. Well, Orlando, you would be good when we decide to do the Wiz, but any other any I'm not sure if you're qualified to do Shakespeare or any other play, but thanks so
Right.
much for coming.
I'm
Thanks so
out
much
for
for
Raising in the
coming.
Sun. Yeah.
Yeah,
Raising
yeah,
in
or
the
raising the
Sun. What are the other ones? The Three Birds and all that stuff. Yeah, I know. I'm
so
there.
has that ever has that ever happened, or and if it's not actually happened, have you ever felt like part of the rejection for you was because of your skin color?
Oh, definitely. I felt that in different theater companies around the Triangle. I've experienced it. Um, a big part of it is I think non-Black directors or casting people like trying to tell me what is Black and what is not, and a lot of the things that I would have to go up for were kind of set in a certain period where you had to speak a certain way and act a certain way. And I think that if it's not authentic for them, or then sometimes that could be the reason why they're not using. In my personal experience for certain things. But if it's for something that isn't race specific, I definitely still feel like certain people get chosen over others based on relationships rather than talent. And that's just unfortunately in any industry. When I was modeling and things like that, that's the way it is. It's like they say sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know. I would just hope that wouldn't be based, really on race. But sometimes it is, unfortunately.
And my last question for you, which I'm definitely going to ask you, Alex, because like I said, I know you have to go, and it just be me and Alex up here doing it.
Hold it down, Alex.
What is a safe space? So, okay, scenario. I'm in a play, my first time as an actor ever doing theater, and I'm sitting down at the round table, and the stage manager is reading me the rules. And number 7, I always say number 7. She goes through number 6. She gets to number 7. This is a safe space. And then she goes on to number 8. What does that mean to me?
For me, it doesn't mean a whole lot if the microaggressions exist and the unwelcoming. There's energy, and then there's sort of facts. And so an energy is how I feel in the situation when I walk in, and that could be based on something that's actually happened, or it could be based on my own previous experiences or preconceived notions. So energy is not necessarily factual. Factual things are, if I walk in a room in rehearsal, in the first rehearsal, let's say I got cast in this production and I'm in it, and we go in for rehearsal, and it's like a 80% white, 20% Black cast. And I've done some productions in Raleigh where the cast is huge. There's a lot of people there, and you walk in and like a lot of them don't even speak to you, when you walk in the room. And, I was raised very specifically, as I know a lot of people were, but specifically I have to say in the Black community, there's this rule that when you walk in a room where there are people, you speak, and vice versa. That's just what you do. My parents would be appalled if they knew I was out in the world just walking, going into situations and not speaking to my colleagues. And you know what I'm saying? It's just disrespectful. And so I experienced that a lot, where I just felt very unwelcome by these other adults that I was having to share scenes with, share dressing rooms with, and things like that. It's just like, wow, it's really weird that I'm sitting right next to this person and they never speak to me unless I speak to them first. And then it still seems like there's this resistance and I'm just not welcomed, or, you know what I mean? That kind of a thing. So I've dealt with that quite a bit in the North Carolina theater, on the North Carolina theater scene.
So that's your definition of what a safe space should be.
That's a part of what a safe space should be. I should feel comfortable and I should feel welcome. I shouldn't feel insecure and unwelcome in that place. I don't think there's anything safe about feeling like you're not welcome somewhere when you've been cast in a production and you have every right to be there. Especially when there's already only a handful of people who look like you around. I mean, I don't know how anybody couldn't see how you making me feel unwelcome would only exasperate the situation of, I'm already like the only Black person here with you right now, and you're not talking to me. So how am I supposed to feel? Like, the racial climate as a non-Black person. So I would think you would be cognizant of, I'm not going to make this person feel even more unwelcome in this space, or I'm not going to perpetuate any stereotypes that people like him might have about people like me. Let's do something to dispel that sort of stereotype. And that's an opportunity for that person to do their part as well in creating that safe environment, that copacetic sort of, and if you don't take that opportunity, I mean, you have to own that and be responsible for that. And so to answer your question, no, I don't consider that a safe space, especially to create and thrive as an artist.
Well, let me ask you that. Let me ask you this: when you were in this area, if that ever happened to you, if you were doing something and that happened to you, did you feel compelled to say something to someone, or did you just let it go?
No, I always say something one way or another. I think my way of dealing with it has been, I don't remember the woman's name, but maybe a week or two ago, she was walking into, I think it was a White House briefing. She was a Black politician, and she said, "Good morning," and the room was dead silent. We all know that clip. And she said, "Good morning," the room was dead silent. And she put her paper down and was like, "I said good morning." And they were like, "Good morning." And it was a very auntie, and that was how I was raised, and every brown or Black person that I know, that's how they were raised. When somebody says good morning to you, you say good morning. And when they don't, you're just like, "Excuse me?" Because it's disrespectful. I'm a human being. I just greeted you. Be respectful enough to greet me back, and even if you don't like me. And so I kind of go about things that way, because that's the way the people in my family went about it with me. And so sometimes you have to highlight people's sort of flaws, if you will, indirectly to get them to see, you know what I mean? And the way she did, she handled it very well, in my opinion. It wasn't confrontational or combative, but it was very direct, what she was getting at. And then she later said, I mean, I thought I was in the room alone, because I said, good morning, and nobody said anything. And that's kind of how I felt walking into a lot of rehearsals or auditions and things like that. It's just like, "Hi." And then you're like, "I said hello." Like, are you deaf? I mean, not to be rude, but it's like, come on, show me some respect. So that's kind of how I'm going about it.
And I'm looking for the doggone video right now.
I forget what's her name. Do you know?
Wait a minute. I think I found it. Oh, I found it. I found it. Hold on. Lauren, wait. Okay. Hold on, Lauren. I might need you to give me control.
Such an iconic moment.
Yes, it is.
That video was shared all over the place because people were like, "Oh my God, finally someone like that just gets it."
Secretary Fudge was elected the first.
Lauren, see if you, Lauren, let me, I want to share.
Ohio, a position she held for 2 terms. As mayor of Warrensville Heights, she
one
of the first vacant.
And Orlando, I know you, like I said, I know you have to go, but
she brought new residential
here we go.
development to the city and addressed the city's growing foreclosure crisis
Through the formation of a long partnership that helped residents
maintain the financial security needed to buy or keep a home. As Secretary Fudge has said, her first priority as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development is to alleviate the housing crisis and get people the support they need.
From the edge. She's happy to take a couple of questions after she gives some remarks. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jen. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Oh, thank you. I was wondering if I was in this room by myself. Jen, thanks for inviting me to speak.
thing like this, you were able to do that quick. That was really nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys saw it and heard it, hasn't it? You saw it and heard it, right? It was because okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I saw it clearly.
Yeah,
it was just like on the news when they do it.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. So with that being said, the reason why I ask about a safe space is because the way I'm presenting it to you guys is the way it's done. And it's almost like people saying, well, good morning, how are you doing? And then the response is, I'm fine. When technically you may not even be fine. You might have had a bad day, but it's the programming that I've been talking about. We're so trained that when someone says, good morning, how are you? Good morning, I'm fine, even if you're actually not fine. So a lot of theaters are still saying this is a safe space. Well, what exactly does that mean? Is it safe from sexual harassment? Is it safe from race? Is it safe from that ladder falling and hitting me in the head? They never define what safe is. And we have these Chicago codes of ethics, but we're still having issues like the LA Alliance thing. We're still having all these issues. So, you know, we're not forming our words right. We're not meaning what we say. And the microaggression is still there. So I asked you that question about what is a safe space because, you know, I want to know from everyone in theater, what does it mean to you? And most of the time I get different answers from different people. And it, you know, it just like, it doesn't make sense. And I'm trying to make the theaters aware of what they're doing or not doing. But you both have told me something. Like the only place I've ever done theater is Wake County because I live here. But you both y'all have shot Raleigh like a new hole because it's like, yeah, it's bad. And I definitely think it needs to be seen that it is bad here. Orlando, you can stay for a few more minutes if you can.
I have a few more minutes, yeah.
Okay, Alex, let me come to you. Have you ever done theater and something wasn't safe? All the definitions, all the meanings of safe I just said. Did you say something? Did you feel compelled to say something or?
You know, I'll be honest, I don't think really any kind of theater experience I've had since I've moved here specifically has been safe. Because I feel like it's, like you mentioned, like we have the Chicago codes, you know, we had the LA Stage Alliance, we have all these things on paper that look great, but when you put it in action, it's not there. It's really not there. There's still a level of discomfort when it comes to calling out bad behavior. You know, there's this worry of, am I going to get myself blacklisted in the theater community, you know, for speaking out on this? Is my name going to be passed around as, oh, she's difficult to work with because she brings up all these issues that are, you know, meaningless. You know, all these people don't have an issue with it, but she does, you know, it's that kind of thing. So for me,
I can still hear you. Well, no, I can't. Hold on. You're muted. Now talk. Nope. We can't hear you now.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, I got it. Yeah. I was like checking to make sure it's not me. So yeah, for me, I haven't really encountered that. And when you look at the makeup of who's running theaters in the area, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So you don't. So tell me
totally
this.
Relate to everything you just said. Like that's the number one fear for, I think, any of us, not just Black people, but women is particularly. That's just look at the whole Me Too movement and how that sort of all came unraveled and why so many didn't say anything so much sooner. When it had been happening for so long, and it's all because of what you just said, the fear of, I'm never gonna work again, or are they gonna believe me, or are people gonna think I'm difficult, and blah, blah, blah. And the thing that I've learned is, even when you don't speak up, and even when you don't make a relevant grievance, people are gonna say you're difficult whether you're not, if that's what they want to say. And so you just kind of have to, I think the truth always wins in the end. And as long as you're speaking the truth and telling the truth, it will prevail, is what I've learned. And so I can't be hesitant to speak the truth, because even if they do try to blackball me or I don't get another gig, at least I'm doing something for the person who has to come behind me.
Mhm.
I don't believe in leaving a space as you found it. So I always have to make sure that I leave it better than how I found it. And it's just, I guess it's a risk that I have to be willing to take, and standing up for myself is,
Yeah.
being blackballed. And for me at this point, and with all the technology and things that we have, there is no such thing as blackball me. I can go create my own platform and start my own theater. People have started small theater companies since I've been in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Mhm.
Some of the theaters were not there that are there when I first moved here, and it's still growing. So I have to be willing to be entrepreneurial in that way, and start my own and carve out my own if people aren't willing to give me opportunities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you. I hope you can stay to hear this. Alex, you said something about the talent pool, and you were picked for that play because they said they had to have a Japanese person in there. Do you think in this area, because we're gonna stay in this area because right now, because both of you have been talking about this area, do you think the theaters do enough to find the talent of the heritages that they're looking for?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So when one of my plays was selected for a big festival, and my play, most of the cast is Asian, and I wasn't able to attend the auditions, but apparently there were no Asian people at the auditions, and I got oh, that's too bad. I guess we can't do your play. And I'm like, oh, I will find Asian actors. And I did. I found Asian actors.
So
Yeah.
why
Go
do you
ahead.
think they weren't at the audition originally? What do you think the reason was?
Either they didn't know about it, or a bunch of them said they didn't know about it, but also there was a couple of them who said, I didn't really feel safe going to that audition.
Did
So
they tell you why?
so these are Asian American actors. They said we don't have a lot of representation in the North Carolina theater community, and when we are pulled for roles, it's just for our heritage, not for our talent. Kind of like what Orlando was touching on earlier. They audition for like Shakespeare and straight plays and non-Asian centric shows, and they don't get cast. And and they felt they could trust me because I'm part Asian, and I wrote a piece about the Asian American experience in the United States. And so then they were like, this piece needs to be out, and they were very passionate about it. They read the script and wanted to be a part of it. So for me, I got lucky. But when they told me there was a level of trust there that they don't have in this theater community, it really stood out to me. And then this same festival was the way they did it, I didn't like how they did it, but they were trying to recruit Asian actors. They didn't really do it very compassionately, or very what's the word I'm looking for? Just lack of awareness of like the words they were using and what they were saying. And did any Asian actors show up? Nope. So
Wow.
there's a level of trust there, but there is an underground Asian performing community in North Carolina, in Raleigh specifically. It is very underground. It is very underground. Yeah, it's very underground.
I didn't know that.
Me either.
It's not like it's like I said, it's very underground. I didn't even know about it until I went to it's a Asian American Asian festival in Raleigh, and there was like taiko drums and all this beautiful festival, and then all of these actors came on stage and they started doing plays, and they're like, oh yeah, we're a performing group. We do plays. And I'm like, where have you been? And I'm like, hi. So, and
Mhm.
yeah, and actually we're in talks right now to have them perform my play, because I've also shopped my play around the theater community here, and it hasn't gotten accepted to be performed because they're worried they can't find enough Asian actors to play these roles. So, but
Wow.
it's going to find life. It's going to find life in North Carolina. So, which I'm happy about. And this is a play that I written that's been done in Chicago. It's been done in Seattle. It's been done in San Diego and LA. Not quite New York yet. I'm working on it, but yeah, it has not yet found a home here in North Carolina, which
because there's no one to do it.
Yeah.
Wow.
There are. And there are. You just got to go find them. You got to reach out. You reach out and create a welcoming community and a welcoming space for everybody, because I understand why they don't, why there's a distrust there in the Raleigh theater community. I mean, just my experience alone, I'm very jaded about the theater community here. So,
Yeah.
Orlando, let me ask you something. So let me give you a scenario. So you're directing and you're co-directing, and you have an audition for a particular part, and a bunch of people come out. The three people you like the best are Black people. Your co-director auditions people. It's a white male. And the three people he picks that he likes the best are white people. The artistic director says nothing to them, but tells you, don't you think you were being a little biased? Hey, we see the baby in the background. Hey, we see you now. Don't run. Hey, don't run from me now. Don't run. Okay.
That's my friend who's Pandemanian condo we're in right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yes. So they ask you, don't you think you're being a little biased? What is your response, knowing everything in the scenario I just set up?
I would ask them to sort of elaborate on that bias based on what? And
okay.
Why? And I would have to ask why they don't think the other director making their selection, why their decision wasn't biased.
Okay. Well, you did pick, you picked 3 African Americans, and there were other people there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if I was in this scenario, hypothetically speaking, I know making my selections, it would be based on talent and my idea and understanding of what excellence is. And so, I mean, that would be how I would have to defend it. And if it came down to me sort of highlighting one person's attributes and sort of explaining why I don't feel the other individual had those attributes, then that's what I would do. And that's what I have done. Because sometimes it comes down to that, to just saying I don't really feel like that person's acting ability was authentic, or I don't really feel like that person had a great singing voice, or they weren't able to really sing on key or project or hold the notes or whatever it is. You have to be willing to argue your point accurately, because it can't be biased. It needs to be based on facts and fairness. And so for me, I would just argue my point with facts as to why I chose who I chose, or I didn't choose who I didn't choose. And go ahead.
I was gonna his scenario, Alex. Is there ever a time or point when you literally just look at this artistic director and say, the white boy chose 3 white people, I chose 3 Black people? Is his okay? Mm-hmm. Is there ever a time when you just call, and Orlando, how people used to say it, is there ever a time when you call a spade a spade? And I'm asking you. So is Alex? Is there ever a
Me.
time when you do that? No, I was asking Alex.
Okay.
Is there a time where I would do that? Call a spade a spade?
When not you specifically, but as a person. So let's say Orlando, because Orlando just said he would come back with the facts and he would lay the facts out on the line and then is there ever a point where you say, hold up, the optics of this don't even look right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would probably do the same as Orlando. Yeah, luckily, this is not an experience I have ever had in real life yet. Well, knocking on wood. But yeah, I mean, I would call that out. I would, especially since I would be in a different position and maybe somewhat of a position of power. I think that's an important thing to note because, for me being powerless in a situation often in this particular theater community, I haven't really had the confidence to call that out. Because I have seen it. I've also seen it with body diversity too in this theater community, and body discrimination. And I only got confident recently when there was a survey put out, and it was an anonymous survey. Again, it's that whole fear of being blacklisted thing that's coming back around. But yeah, no, I would, I would.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Orlando, would you ever get to that point where you just had to say, okay, look, the optics of this don't look right. You didn't say anything to the white boy with the 3 white people, but you're saying something to me with the 3 African American. Or would you?
Yeah, I could definitely see myself getting to that point that's in some way or another. Probably in the audition space, I wouldn't do that. I would have to have a private meeting with that person. For me personally, it's always about getting the best solution, the best result. And so I try to do things in the most productive way possible and the least divisive way possible. And again, there's different ways to highlight someone's flaws or wrongdoings without directly saying it. And I think sometimes when you take a different approach, it highlights it, it makes it very obvious. And that sometimes is more productive than me sort of just being direct and perceivably argumentative. It just really it hasn't proven itself productive in my opinion. So I tend to go about it the way that I've learned it to be the most productive. And that's by me just kind of stating the facts again, highlighting what is true and about who I've selected or what is false about who you selected. And people who are there to have the best result possible are going to see the truth for what it is. And if they don't, then they were never looking for the truth to begin with. And then that's another, you're at another place when you get to that point where you realize that the people aren't there for the truth or what is right, then you have a decision to make from that point. Now you're in a space where you're just not welcome. And so you have to decide if you're going to stay and tolerate it or make an exit and do something else. So yeah, I would, depending on the situation, I would just call a spade. And, sometimes that's just not for me the way to go about it. So it just depends on the situation. Yeah.
Alex, let me add something that he said. He's telling me how he would be, diplomatic about going through this, and he may not come right out and say it because it may come off the wrong way.
The angry black man. I'm just playing.
No, you playing, but the statement that I gave to him about you picked 3 African Americans, don't you think that in itself is offensive and calls and I'm asking personal and calls for me to say to be direct with them? Should I be diplomatic like Orlando wants to be when this artistic director came at me and said, you picked 3 African Americans? Isn't that harsh in itself?
I mean, I agree, and I'm in a different place where I feel like we know better by now. We know better by now. So I personally, for me, I wouldn't be as diplomatic because we know better, especially with the way that our climate has changed just in the past 2 years, just 2 years. And if that question was asked, I mean, I'd be fairly direct. I mean, there's been a lot of conversations that have happened, a lot of conversations, and it's like we know better by now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're
Like
supposed
with
to.
the question mark. That's the problem, is that you like common sense is not common anymore. And you assume that people know things and because it's been out there so much that, you know, the message has been sort of processed and understood, but that doesn't mean they've comprehended it sometimes. And sometimes I find that I have to actually have these one-on-one conversations, these enlightening conversations with other groups of people still. And I can't take it for granted that just because a lot of has come out in recent years with technology and social media, that everybody is on the same level and they get it, because they don't. And for me, if I want change and progress, I have to always be in a position where I have a willingness to sort of educate people and sort of guide them a little bit, those who are willing, because some people just aren't willing. They're just committed to being ignorant. And then there are other people who are just genuinely ignorant and they don't get it. And they've been at marches and rallies and things with other people who look and think just like them. They haven't really integrated the activism. And so it's been a lot of fake, sort of activism in progress. They haven't really gotten with other groups of people, the people they're out there marching for and rallying for, and actually talk to those people and gotten a true point of view or gotten true counsel on what they could do to make the situation better. And so I have to have an open mind and understand that just because somebody is in the arts, just because they've been at castings, just because they know the current racial climate, that they understand. And so I kind of have to be willing to make that assessment on an individual basis, even though it's very exhausting. And I shouldn't have to at this point. But if I want progress, I have to be willing, and the reason that I am willing still is because I've had experiences where there's been a positive outcome from me taking the time to do that. And I've seen people change drastically from truly being educated by someone who's not like them. So yeah, I'll continue sort of being reasonably diplomatic about things, as long as I feel like it's progressive, and sort of assess each situation on an individual basis. I'm never going to take any crap from anybody. So that's always at the sort of the forefront of who I am as a person. And with that being said, I still need to balance that with some compassion and empathy, because again, it's all about progress. I'm going to highlight the negative, the discrimination, racism and division, all of those things, all the prejudice. I'm going to highlight it every chance I get, but I'm also going to always strive to end it with us understanding each other and being able to coexist in a harmonious environment. I'm not ever here in a space like this just to express grievances without there being any sort of plan or way, or me also expressing what I think these theaters can do to make things better. It's also very important to come to these discussions with a solution and come with a spirit of having there be a solution. So that's always at the forefront of my thinking when I enter these different discussion forums. And like the interview that just was posted to my YouTube a couple of days ago with an organization in Raleigh, I was very, very candid on racism and discrimination in the music industry, particularly talking about Raleigh. But again, it was always being very honest about how things are, but I was very clear, and I kept reiterating what I think these local businesses could do to make the situation better. I want them to know that I think that they can make it better, and I'm willing to give them the opportunity to make it better. And I said in that video that if they did make it better, then I also had a solution for that as well. So that's at my YouTube channel at Orlando Parker Jr. You can check it out when this is done.
Yeah, right. Thank you, sir. And we definitely we'll be looking at that. Don't worry about that. let me ask Alex something he said. Let me ask you about this. He was saying about the being ignorant in theater. When do you finally say, okay, you're not being ignorant anymore, you're doing this on purpose? You know, and I know that's kind of a real open thing because scenarios are different, but from what you two have told me, Raleigh has a pattern as far as theater goes. And this pattern hasn't changed that much over the decades. Because if it had, then you wouldn't be experiencing it, and he wouldn't have experienced it just this century. So, yeah, your opinion on that. I mean, how many cheeks do you turn? You ain't got before. Go ahead.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, when it gets to a point where they're either digging their heels into the ground with their opinion, with their points, regardless of how, instead of being an exchange of, instead of there being an exchange of understanding, or at least like where there is a conscious effort to be listening, reflective listening, being open to suggestions, or even just let alone offering alternatives and different ideas. If it just goes back to, no, this is what I feel, this is how it needs to be. I guess when they're just not budging, for me is more of a, okay, so I've expressed my grievance to you. I've expressed to you why what you said is problematic, but you're still sticking to it.
Somebody's phone.
Yeah.
Is that my phone?
No.
No, that was mine. Go ahead. I was like, oh Lord, what have you done, Orlando? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah.
That's the whole interview. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and also, I guess, reiterating problematic statements as their defense. That's where I've noticed ignorance in past exchanges that I've had with people that I've had conversations with about, at least with my personal experiences with the race discussion, as they like to call it.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess for me, I guess if it's pure, like, you're not being ignorant, you're being blatantly biased. Yeah, that I've found in my experience, people like that usually don't budge. Like, they'll even hear you out, but then they don't budge or even offer alternative solutions. So that's kind of my red flag for me.
Okay. Orlando.
And I'm gonna have to go because my phone is going dead. That's what that buzz was. So I'll leave on that, on what Alex just said, is when it gets to that point, that where you're sitting at a table where respect is no longer being served, and it's time to get up from the table. And that's ultimately, I think, with everything that you've said, that's ultimately what we're getting at here, is once we do all that we think we can do in whatever place we're coming from, trying to be productive and empathetic and all that stuff, if they ultimately are not willing to change and to sort of progress and move forward, then it's time to just get up from the table. And that's, you've done everything that you can do, and it's just, you're beating a dead horse at that point. And so whether it's the theater company or
And if your phone dies, I'm sorry, it just dies. So it's easy for, and I'm gonna think like a new actor or whatever. It's easy for you to say, because you got London, you got all these other places, but all I got is Raleigh, and I can't leave right now. So if that happens to me in the theater, then what am I supposed to do? Because I want the theater to change.
I don't know how to address that, because on a very personal level, I completely disagree. Like, I'm from the east side of Detroit, so you couldn't say that to me in real life. Like, I'm not like, no, like, if I can go somewhere else, I feel like anybody can. So that's kind of a tough, I don't know how to answer that, because
You just did. You
people
did
have-
answer it. You answered it.
You can, if that's what you need to do, you do it, because there's I'm looking around, just touring around Panama today. There are people who have it a couple of 100 times worse here in countries like this than the worst person that we can find in Raleigh, as far as not having resources, assistance, and opportunities and things like that. So if you can't, no one's going to just hand you anything. No matter what position you're in, you're going to have to be willing to do some work, to be ambitious, and to understand that people aren't just going to hand you things. There are going to be times where you have to fight for stuff, even as a white person. I mean, there are going to be things where you have to fight for opportunities and things like that. But just getting back to talking about, minorities, in women and things like that. Yeah, you're just gonna have to. I'm sorry, but I'm here to tell you, you're gonna have to be willing to move sometimes. You're gonna have to be willing to move. You're gonna have to be willing to spend your own money to produce things. You're gonna have to be willing to get with people and talk about how you can start your own theater company. That's the reality. I've had to produce my own music videos and things like that for years in different countries and things like that, and buddy up with people and barter their directorial services and their camera people just to get stuff made. So that realistically, you're going to have to be willing to do that, especially as a Black person. And you ask Oprah Winfrey or Barack Obama or any of the most successful people out there, which I am nowhere near their level, that they'll tell you the same thing. So there's no excuses ultimately. And if you believe that success is owed to you and you actually have something to offer to the people as an artist, you may have to do something drastically, like move to another city, state, or country. And if you're not willing to do that, like Nina Simone and James Baldwin and all those, and people like Josephine Baker have been having to do since the beginning, then maybe you're not cut out for it. And I'll leave at that, because that's sometimes what you have to do as a minority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I'm with all that.
They've all moved overseas, and we've done what we've had to do. We don't always do what we want to do, but we always do what we have to do.
Do. Okay.
Yeah.
I love that answer. Alex, as a female as well, because I know it's supposed to be about race, but we're going to jump to that real quick. And this is real loaded. Do you think it's worse on? Okay. All right, Orlando.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much for having me. We'll talk again soon. No problem.
Yes, we will. Okay. Bye. Alex, do you think it's worse on women or worse on people of color? Ooh. Theater. Told you it's loaded.
That is a loaded question. It's if you separate the two, like just individually, I would say, I would almost say probably people of color. But then if you have a woman of color, it's, oh my gosh. Because as a woman, as a white presenting woman, I've still had opportunities that my friends of color did not get those same opportunities. So yeah.
Okay. I appreciate that answer. That is that's interesting. Do you think of yourself more as because like I said, it was interesting to me at the beginning of the show. The first thing you said was Japanese. Mm-hmm. So is that something that's well known in this area about your heritage? And you were saying people of color, but I consider you a person of color. Mm-hmm. But the average person doesn't. So is that a problem for you as far as in theater to not be recognized for your heritage?
For me, a little bit, because it goes into that whole Asian erasing that is an ongoing problem in our community. What I have found interesting is that other people of color, other Asian Americans, no, they look at me and they say, yeah, you're Asian. Even when I don't tell people, there's there are a couple of part Asian women in the theater community, and they immediately like pulled me aside and they said, hey, are you part Asian? I'm like, yeah, I am. And they're like, we are too. I'm like, oh, hey, it's which again was not an experience I had until I moved here.
Right.
I never had to defend my heritage and who I am. It came to a point where when people saw a picture of my grandfather, they saw a picture of my mother, they're like, oh, we see it now. And I'm like, okay, if I had black hair, would you see it more? Like,
right.
It turned into this like, and it goes back to the problematic reviews of Avenue Q too. It's like, oh, she wasn't Japanese enough. And I'm like, okay, so what is Japanese?
Enough. What is Japanese enough?
What is Japanese enough?
Yes,
like,
right. That's the word. It's
yeah.
the enough part, because see, well, and every now and then I give opinions, and I'm gonna give my opinion on this. See, by just saying she isn't Japanese, and then to find out later that you are, makes the reviewer look bad. But if to say not Japanese enough, that's questionable on all sides. But like you said, nobody bothered to ask the reviewers what is enough.
Yep.
Which is why they keep the reviews away from me when I'm in a play, because they know I start typing. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, there was one review that had said, given her last name, I have to assume there must be some sort of heritage there, like Japanese heritage, and then went on to say that it would have been better off if like another person of Asian like someone who's not Japanese play the role, or even someone who's Mexican play the role. And I'm like, well, you don't, while still trying to be an advocate for people of color. And this was like a super small like theater blog, I think. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to give it attention. But at the same time, I'm like, this is a really problematic statement, because are you saying that all people of color look the same? And it was very like, I was very taken aback by this person's commentary about me and who I was and my heritage. And again, it was written by someone who is white, and any sort of questioning of my heritage or who I am has come from white people. And that's again, but white people that here, white people here, because I know my casting of Christmas Eve was very controversial, and to the point where Carly actually pulled me aside and was like, hey, this conversation's happening, but I'm telling you, I stood up for you. And I'm like, I didn't even know this conversation about it was happening, and no one bothered to include me in it. No one bothered to talk to me about it.
Right. Right.
So it's been a lot of that, people talking about me, but not talking to me about it, or having a discussion about it. So, or at least including me in that discussion.
Right. Exactly. Okay. See, you know what? Right quick, I was looking at our private chat and I didn't look at the comments. So my mom is up here. I don't know why she put a bunch of question marks. My mom always watches the show. Hey, Mom. Maya likes my background. Yeah. And okay. I appreciate that too. United Statesians. I don't know Gary Easter. I don't know Gary. It's a friend of Orlando's. Let's talk about COVID right quick.
Yeah.
Did you have COVID at all? Did you have coronavirus?
No.
Okay.
I got let.
Okay.
Well, I wasn't officially diagnosed, but last January of 2020, I got really, 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 really sick, and lower respiratory infection. They couldn't diagnose it. And it was about January, and yeah. So so I kind of wonder, but as of right now, no, I've never been officially diagnosed with COVID.
Okay. What are your thoughts on how Asian Americans are being treated behind this? I'm pulling at your heartstrings.
Yeah.
Right now.
Oh yeah, you are.
So I'm not gonna sugarcoat it to anybody that's watching. I want an Asian American heritage person to tell me what they are feeling.
Terrified. Terrified for my family. Terrified, and even terrified for me. Like I said, there are people who see it, and even on social media, I get harassed because people see my last name. They don't see my picture, but they'll see my last name, and I've gotten from this town, not theater people, but random people, like, when you join these public Facebook groups. Raleigh community information, I'm looking at you. But I'll get some really awful messages telling me to go back to China, which I'm like, hi, Japanese. At least get it right.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm honestly terrified, especially after the events of Atlanta. Atlanta, I think, really, between Atlanta and then these, folks in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, especially Seattle. My uncle is half Japanese, and he's in his early 60s, and he basically stays in his condo the whole time. He doesn't go out. And it's not just because of COVID. He doesn't go out because he sees the news, and he's like, I'm not going out there. Like, I'm not going to put my life at risk right now, because we just don't know. We don't know. And it's going out and wondering, am I going to be spit on today? Am I going to be pushed down today? Am I going to be tripped? And it's and it's kind of always been there too, but it just and I guess that's the other reason why I'm also a little frustrated too, that people are just now realizing that Asians, the Asian American Asian community does deal with racism. And I'm like, why, why do we care? Why do we care now? Why do we care now? Why haven't you all cared before? People are still just now learning about the Japanese internment camps. And it blows my mind. But yeah, with racism being up, I think it's 150% now. Terrified, and I'm constantly, like, worried about my family. I'm worried about my family. I mean, I know for me, I'll be okay. I know I'll be okay for the most part. But I worry for my family. It's always that, and it just breaks my heart to think of them going through any sort of discrimination, racism, hate. I mean, I still personally have issues even dealing with thinking of my great aunts and uncles in the internment camps. It's one of those things that, and it brings up a lot of old wounds, especially with my family. So.
Something you said, and I'm looking it up right now because I want to know what the major difference is. Internment camps. What's the difference between that and concentration camps?
So a lot of people, when they think of Japanese internment camps, and they think of concentration camps, they're thinking of the level of the Holocaust that happened to the Jewish people in Hitler's Europe. So Japanese Americans had a different experience. So internment, meaning they were put in relocation centers. So once they surrendered their land, their homes, had their 1 or 2 suitcases, they went to relocation centers. A lot of times this was at like a racetrack. So they were living in horse stalls. They were able to stay together as a family. They didn't go through what Jewish people went through with the Holocaust. There were still terrible things that happened in Japanese internment camps, but it wasn't like the same level as like a concentration camp. So it was more of like, let's put this group over in the corner, because the whole idea was to keep them away from water, which is why you have internment camps like in Arkansas and I think and in different parts of like middle America. It's like, let's keep them away from the ocean. That was like one of the things that really like stood out to me of like, why? Jerome, well, okay, so Minnesota, that was where my grandfather went right into the Army. So he didn't go to an internment camp, but his wife was in an internment camp. She was at Jerome. So yeah, so it was like, let's just put these people to the side and let's keep them away from the rest of America, because we think they might be dangerous. Whereas when I think of concentration camps, I'm thinking genocide, widespread decimation of a group of people. I mean, internment camps weren't better. I mean, they weren't better in the sense of like, this is still discriminating against a group of people. Many people died in the internment camps from illness, sickness, childbirth, lack of resources to health care. I mean, well, if we go into the group the group of men who revolted against serving, then they had a completely different experience. That experience was probably more like a concentration camp. Like my grandfather's brother was sent to a POW prisoner camp because he went snorkeling in the San Francisco Bay, and he was accused of surveying the coastline for Imperial Japan. So his experience was not quite the, okay, we're going to live in a horse stall or we're going to live in a cabin until this blows over type of idea. It was, no, he was beaten, he was interrogated, he was tortured. His experience was much different.
Okay. I want to read this definition to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to tell me what word the definition is for. The state of being confined as a prisoner, especially for political or military reasons. What do you think that is?
Say that again. Say that definition one more time.
The state of being confined as a prisoner, especially for political or military reasons.
I would almost say that would be an internment camp.
Okay. You don't think that would be a concentration camp?
Well, it could be a concentration camp too. So
it is
kind of interchangeable.
You were right in the word that you put with it, but what you just said. I asked you this because if you put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig.
Yeah.
So in America, it's an internment. But in Germany, it was a concentration camp.
Yeah. And this brings up an interesting point, too, because a lot of Japanese Americans are almost, it's as sad as this is, almost apologetic for even like saying, hey, this happened to us, because even in the conversations I've had, it's like, well, they had it much worse in Germany. They had it much worse in Europe. So almost invalidating what, Japanese and Japanese Americans went through here in America. So this is like generational lingo that's coming out right now.
and what I'm trying to make you see is the programming.
Yeah.
You've been programmed to believe that what happened here wasn't as bad as what happened in Germany. But did people die from it? Yes. Did they have the freedom to go anywhere they wanted to? No. You just said they were living in horse stalls, like, and you said it as if it
was just horse stalls.
It was just horse stalls, and I'm like, really? But again, it's the programming.
Yeah.
And that's really what this whole program this whole show is about, is the programming. And I never really thought about the internment and the concentration camps before because, well, it's not my story. You know, it's not my ancestors' story. But as you were saying it, I really was sitting here. I was like, there's no difference.
Yeah.
There's no difference. We don't know for sure if they didn't take some people and put them in gas chambers. We don't know that. They beat the natives here and dwindled them down to close to almost extinction. They beat us. They beat my people and killed them. This country has let me rephrase that. People who came over and took this land have a tendency to use violence to solve their needs. So I really find it interesting that, you know, that the programming has, well, no, I won't say I find it interesting, because I'm trying to deprogram myself too. That you know, we're programmed still, and I just never thought about the programming of your heritage, but it's there.
There's a lot of it. There's a lot of it. You know, especially with the whole assimilation to American culture to prove patriotism. You know, like there were these forms that they had to fill out after they were in relocation centers and after they got sent to the camps, basically saying like, are you or do you swear your allegiance to the United States? Anyone who said no, they were carted off to a more aggressive camp. It was and then there were a group of men who did, when they were being forced to recruit into the military, you know, they did protest. And they were treated pretty terribly.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to figure out what happened with my grandfather, because he got recruited straight in, and he was going to the University of Washington. He was studying aeronautical engineering, but they picked him up in Alaska. So I'm wondering if he tried to run. They picked him up in Alaska. Yeah. So, and then he got sent to Fort Snelling in Minnesota, and he was in special ops. He was in special ops training American soldiers on how to speak Japanese, and you know, he was doing like these really like interesting things, and so his experience was still, I don't know what he dealt with from day to day. You know, being a Japanese man teaching a room full of white GIs Japanese and having to be an authority figure essentially to this group, and I can't imagine what he dealt with. And his wife was in Jerome, and they actually got married at the internment camp in like one of the recreation rooms. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So see, and that's what when I was talking with Orlando about, as far as theater goes, when I was talking to him about, you know, he was saying he was trying to be diplomatic. It's like, so he was assimilating. He instead of being himself and expressing what he wanted, he had to conform to fit in. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with being diplomatic. We all should be at some point. But my thing is, if you come at me direct, like, you know, you pick 3 African Americans, then in turn, why can't I do the same to you? Why do I have to conform to, you know, so that you know, that was that. But yeah, that's some interesting information you kind of gave me on that, because I never really knew about the camps or what goes on in them. So
I mean, I'm still learning too. I'm still learning as well. You know, I know what my family's experiences were, you know, and I know that my grandpa completely assimilated. I mean, my mom and my uncle never learned how to speak Japanese. I think if there was anything that they learned from my grandfather, was just keep your head down and blend in, and don't don't cause a ruckus. And you know, it's interesting because when my grandpa died, so many people came to his funeral and they all said that he was the nicest man that they had ever met. And I'm like, oh, it's because grandpa was a nice guy. But then I wondered, like, was it because he was just grinning and bearing it too? And I mean, this is a man who was a poster child for racial equality in 1946 in Minneapolis, which we never learned, and we never knew that he led a major protest for like racial equality in housing in Minneapolis. We didn't learn this until about five years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He and 50 other American veterans at University of Minneapolis had basically, they didn't, I guess what they did, they wanted to create a cooperative solution to the housing crisis in Minneapolis at the time. And they had organized a group called Oak Hill Builders to build low-cost housing on a plot of about 80 acres. And they got an estate firm to help build the houses. But then they told my grandpa, you can't buy a house here because you are Japanese, and it's going to lower the value of these homes. And hence that's where the movement came from. But again, we never learned about this. We didn't know about this until about 5 years ago when a reporter contacted my uncle. We're like, wait, he did what? He did what?
So this wasn't a part of any history.
Not any part of any family history. And I'm sitting here like, how come we never knew about this? And it just it's starting to get more traction now, thanks to what's happening, you know, to the, you know, Asian community in America. But it's starting to get more of a spotlight. So I have a lot more reporters contacting me about it, and and I don't know what to tell them. Sometimes I'm like, I just found out about this a few years ago.
and it's called the Oak Hill. It's called the Oak Hill what?
Oak Hill Builders. Yeah, okay. If you Google my grandpa's name, I'll put it in our little chat here. And my grandpa's name in Minneapolis, you'll find it. And that story is actually also used to spotlight how Minneapolis has had a problem with racism since the passing of George Floyd too. And people are a lot of news outlets are using that story too. And I'm like, holy cow! Because a lot of the hits on my website now are coming from people Googling my grandpa's name. And I'm like, that's interesting. It's interesting. So who knows? It may become a bigger story down the line. I mean, I hope it does, because I didn't realize how cool my grandpa was and how outspoken he was. I mean, he led this huge protest, and yeah, I mean, it's pretty remarkable. But again, this was not part of my upbringing. It was not part of my mom or my uncle's upbringing. It was very much this thing we never knew about. And I'm sad that I never knew about it either, because, you know, I feel like how much would that have changed, you know, how much would that have changed my upbringing and my childhood if I knew this? And same thing with my mom and uncles. So there you go. Yep.
That's him?
No, he's not. Well, it's okay. So funny enough, the two people in this picture are white. They didn't actually. And here's another thing: there's not one picture of my grandfather in these protests.
Wow.
And I'm like, why? Like, he's the reason why they happened. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
but it's still interesting to be able to look this information up.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we are officially done. Lauren, did you want to show Orlando's video before we leave?
Oh, yes. I want to see it.
We want to see that. Exactly. Lauren, come on. Yeah, come on.
Yes, I do. I don't know why my camera's. Yes,
you are.
I do. Hello. I do. Can we have a quick conversation, Juan and Alex? Because there is something that's disturbing me that has nothing to do with Torn, but let's just nip it in the bud, shall we?
Sure. Let's talk. Let's do it.
So Wake County today announced that they are not going to be doing the Johnson and Johnson vaccine at PNC Arena because people have had, like, 1% of the people who've gotten that shot have had a reaction from it. Juan, you had COVID, you got this vaccine. My concern is that with this news, especially going right into group 5, that people are not going to want to get vaccinated. So what do you say to those people?
You asked a question that I'm going to be honest on.
Of course.
Anyone, and you can not like me for this, people. I don't care. If you don't get vaccinated, you are a complete fool. Just plain and simple. I did not get to spend Christmas with my mother and my brother because I was confined in my house with COVID for 10 days. My brother was in ICU with COVID. Christmas Day was Zoom with my mom and my brother because we couldn't be together because of the coronavirus. And I just so happened that when it came time to get the vaccine, NC State had the Johnson and Johnson, as I say it. They had the Johnson and Johnson, and that's what I got. And I did not experience any side effects because I immediately took some Tylenol. I know what the experience is. I know what it feels like because I had it for 10 days and I had no taste and no smell. If maybe, I don't know if there was a bad batch that they had today that caused some people to be ill, because there was a bad batch that was in Maryland or whatever. But get the vaccine, because I'm telling you, as far as I go, I'm not really going to, after group 5 opens and there's no reason for people not to have it, I'm not really going to be around people that don't get it. That's just plain and simple. And that's my choice. It's your choice to not wear a mask and to whatever. My choice is just to not be around you. And you're not going to take that choice away from me. So, if you don't want to get it, okay. That's something you don't want to do. But my mom has had it. My grandmother, who is 90, has had her vaccine. Not the corona. They didn't have coronavirus. My mom's had her vaccine. My grandmother's had her vaccine, and they didn't do 1 dose like I did. They did 2, and they immediately took their Tylenol and stopped and just sat down somewhere. So
I will say I just had my second vaccine. I was Pfizered. I had my second one on Monday. I was feeling wonky yesterday. I had kind of a rough night last night, and today I am fine. Just get your vaccine. If you're not comfortable with Johnson & Johnson, go somewhere where they offer Moderna or Pfizer. Alex, have you been vaccinated?
Yeah, I had my first one a couple weeks ago, and I'll be getting my second one, I think, on the 23rd.
Good. Yep. Then I can come hug you at your wedding. And Juan, exactly. I can hug you when I see you next week.
Yes, exactly. So I know that people are worried about the vaccine, but I'll trade you. You can experience what I experienced from December 19th through December 29th. I'll gladly help you experience it. And if you're wondering how I will help you experience it, I will take your bottom lip and pull it over your head. That's what it felt like. Okay. That's the feeling that I had. So you want to experience that? Fine. I'll let you experience that for 10 days. And to give you an example of the no taste that I went through, I was eating a Bojangles biscuit. When I started, I tasted the biscuit. By the time I ended, all I tasted was salt and dough. I couldn't taste the biscuit anymore. I lost my taste of smell that quick. So y'all want to experience that, then go right ahead. But get a vaccine.
And not to have the last word here, but if you want me to show a vaccine passport to go back to theater, I will do that too.
Just exactly. Oh, another thing. all y'all who are showing your vaccine cards on social media, do not do that, because it has information that can be stolen from you. It has your name, it has your birth date, and people can get all the information on it and then pretend to be you to get where they need to go without actually getting the vaccine. So stop, either just post a little bit of it or stop posting it at all. Don't do it. Okay, so Lauren.
And Alex, you got to come back and talk to me about paranormal stuff, because we're overdue for another conversation. So we will schedule that. And Juan didn't want to talk about that, but
I'm scared. Okay, I'm scared.
I'll show Orlando's video, and thank you, Juan, again for doing this. I posted a funny video of us this afternoon about watching you in the container, and then you calling me out, and look how far we've come. But I'm always appreciative, and I always learn so much hearing from panelists like Alex, like Orlando, who just have such amazing insight. Every time you do these, I learn something new every time.
Me too, believe it or not. I do as well. That is why it's structured the way it's structured, and it's not structured because it's conversations. And I think it's funny because Orlando everybody that's watching, Orlando really originally was like, I can only be on for an hour. And then he was on, he didn't go anywhere. And then the only reason he got off then is because his phone was about to die. So, and it generally happens that way because people finally get the opportunity to say what they've been thinking and what they've been feeling about the subjects that we're talking about. So, yeah. So,
all right. So I'm going to show Orlando's video, and everyone just have a safe, good weekend, and be persistent, get those vaccines so we can get back to theater.
Yes, exactly. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
For you I was a flame. Love is a losing game. 5-story fire as you came. Love is a losing game. One I wished I never played. Oh, what a mess we made. And now the final frame. Love is a losing game. Played out by the band. Love is a losing hand. More than I could stand. Love is a losing hand. Self-professed, profound, till the chips were down. And now the final frame. Love is a losing game. Though I travel blind, love is a fate to resign. The memories mar my mind. Love is a fate to resign. Over futile odds, and laughed at by the gods. And now the final frame. Love is a losing